Did everybody get dinner? Did anybody get takeout? Okay, good. Yeah. I'm in the Clean Plate Club. It didn't last long. I had ramen from Oka Ramen. So, okay, great.
And I got roasted cauliflower and some kind of dumplings from Adam Mountain. It's delicious.
Oh, cool. Good. Good. Great. Glad to see it. Well, let's go ahead and get started. With the city clerk, please go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order. This is a work session of Manitou Springs City Council for December the 8th, 2020. And if the city clerk would please go ahead and call the order, roll call, please.
Yes. Council members, Judith Chandler.
Present.
John Shada.
You're muted.
John Shada.
He looks frozen.
His screen
He
might
does
be
look frozen. Okay, we'll move on. Julie Wolf.
Here.
Susan Walbrook.
Here.
Steve Brimner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune.
Present.
And Mayor John Graham.
present.
Okay, let me see if he's showed up on the other side yet.
Let's see if we can get John back with the living here.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Councilor John Shada.
You're muted, John. Okay.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, we have 3 discussion items tonight. And before we get started, I'll mention, I think you all received an email. The Hiawatha Gardens was originally scheduled to be discussed tonight, but that is postponed pending getting some additional information. We would anticipate discussing it in January, the first work session, which I believe is the 12th. So if we could go ahead. Our first item is the Carnegie Library. We're getting, this is our update. Since we last met with the library people, it's been about 45 days, and they said they would let us know how far they got in 45 days. So I believe we have several people. I think Rob Dannon is part of that, possibly Mary Pulvermacher, and John Spears, and of course, Christine. So let's go ahead and start off with Christine.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
We do have a PowerPoint tonight while the rest of the team pulls over and gets their screen up. I will share my screen if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, let me get that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, tonight we are here to provide a 45-day update regarding the status of the work that's being completed on the Carnegie Library. Let's see if I can get my screen to go. There we go. So the purpose of tonight, as I mentioned, is the 45-day update. On October 13th, we last visited with you to discuss what our proposed actions were, including initiating final engineering to determine construction drawings and costs, as well as proceed with fundraising efforts. The outline for tonight will include a brief update from staff, which would be myself, Christine Lowenberg, Planning Director for the City of Manitou Springs, and the Preserve and Renew Our Carnegie Library Task Force. We also have as a resource on the screen with you, John Spears, Executive Director for the Pikes Peak Library District. John is joining us tonight as a resource to, if there's a need to answer any questions or consider any topics that he may have specific special understanding of. All right, so with that, let me just briefly tell folks what's in the packet. The City Council packet on page 13 of the packet begins with a point paper that provides a detailed update of the actions and some of the items we'll be discussing tonight. Page 18 of the packet is labeled Attachment 1. This describes the functional structure of the task force. There may be some reference to that tonight, but we don't anticipate going into that into great detail unless someone has a question about that. Page 19 of the packet is Attachment 2. This is an abridged version of the to-do checklist for this particular group. And on page 22 is the proposed resolution of support, which is intended to document the October 13th discussion we had with you. So with that, let me talk just a little bit about, tell you a little bit about staff actions and present the resolution. In the last 45 days, staff, including myself, have been quite busy with the task force. This has included weekly, sometimes twice weekly meetings and work groups to work through various issues, various questions, different excursions, gathering information and testing scenarios. Some of that has included, I've facilitated discussions with the finance director, the clerk's office, and other planning staff. Our intent was to investigate issues such as financing. In the event there's a need to go back to the ballot and ask voters for any additional input or decisions to be made, what is that process? What does that look like? As well as understanding grant opportunities. As you know, we have planning staff, including Michelle Anthony and Karen Birchtold, who have an incredible depth of understanding of grant opportunities for projects like this. As well, we did some investigating and spent time to understand what the match board will be looking forward to over the next 60 days. And this includes an anticipated use of the Colorado Common Grant. We spent some time, and I have been working behind the scenes on a draft outline for an RFP to consider final engineering and construction cost estimates, as well as an item that has come up in the last 45 days has included a need for the Pikes Peak Library District to remain in the Carnegie Library building for an additional 60 days. This is due to some unanticipated construction issues, so we are wrapping that up now so that they can remain there. And then finally, the preparation of a draft resolution. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the intent of this resolution that's being presented is to document and monument our discussion in October. It's key and critical in many ways, but as we went through our exercises over the last 45 days, confirmed that it's incredibly important for us to move forward in grant applications, to know that the city and the task force are working collaboratively on this. So with that, I'd like to discuss the resolution briefly. That's on page 22 of the City Council packet. Throughout the resolution, there are a number of factual statements, others are understandings, which ultimately culminate in 3 sections that really document what it is we're trying to do. So section 1, this will allow city staff to move forward with the issuance of an RFP for final design and construction cost development. I would like to have this hopefully issued in early January. This would be using funds that were established by Ordinance 4317 and Resolution 0819. Section 2 of the resolution is that is to support the Preserve and Renew Our Carnegie Library Task Force to continue its outreach effort seeking grants and capital campaign match and other funding sources that'll support a capital improvement project. And section 3 seeks your support in that the City of Manitou Springs will support the capital improvement project efforts to return the full use of the Carnegie Library building back to its intended use in the community. Something that we discussed when we were here last 45 days ago, but really we were able to come up with sort of an informal expression to describe our efforts, and that's around the collaboration that this takes, and really it's a three-legged stool. We felt strongly as we moved through the last 45 days that in order to successfully preserve, expand, and seek ADA compliance for the building, 3 key entities must be involved, and that has to be the City of Manitou Springs, the Pikes Peak Library District, and the task force, the Preserve and Renew our Carnegie Library Task Force, which represents not only the work that the group is doing as a part of the task force, but also serves to engage and interact with the community, solicit community input, and help us move this process down the road. We continue with the same points of contact, and we included that in here so that if there are any questions or concerns, we can ensure that City Council and the public have full disclosure who's working on this. With the city, it'd be myself, planning director. The Pikes Peak Library District, the key contact there is John Spears. And with the task force, this is Rob Dannon, who is the chair. Throughout the presentation, we'll have a number of other folks presenting as well. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Mary. Mary will continue the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right, so as you recall, at the October 13th work session, the task force agreed to collaborate with the city and the Pikes Peak Library District to allow our iconic library to serve the needs of Manitou Springs for the next 100 years. So our key message really has 3 pieces. The first is that we're committed, we're engaged, and we're working hard to allow this city building to meet the needs of our community. That's something that's been very clearly affirmed by our citizens. Second, we're thrilled that the city is committed to restoring and renewing this iconic building. And then third, we will certainly dig in and offload whatever we can from the city so that the overworked staff don't have to do as much. So we'll do the pieces that we can, but we acknowledge that this really is a city building and a city endeavor. So in terms of the accomplishments, you'll see in the second bullet there that we received notification that the task force was a semifinalist for the 2021 Endangered Places Program designation through Colorado Preservation Inc. So we weren't selected in this cycle, but the director suggested renomination and also offered the support and help and guidance from their staff, and also suggested we continue the productive collaboration that we have going with both the city and the Pikes Peak Library District. Also, since we met in October, we've activated the 3 subcommittees that we have. The task force has been meeting regularly, but now the subcommittees are meeting as well. On the community outreach subcommittee, they've met twice and they set a goal to get the public relations plan out by January. And we understand the importance of reaching out to the community to share information and also help the city address any concerns that arise. And we certainly heard Susan Wolbrook's concerns mentioned at our last meeting regarding the importance of outreach to all of Manitou Springs, but especially to the people in Ward 1, since this is where the library is located. The grant writing and fundraising subcommittee has also been meeting. They meet every 2 weeks, and they're actively researching and documenting grants and what matching fund requests and needs are needed for each of those grants, and have created a spreadsheet and are pulling all that information together. And then the third subcommittee is the Library Expansion ADA subcommittee, and that's the one that I'm facilitating. And we've been meeting weekly at least, as Christine mentioned, with her as the project manager in the Pikes Library District, to come up with an executable plan for library expansion and ADA compliance. We go to the next chart, please. Regarding the strategy, so this is really strategy for the library project, not just for the task force. So the strategy is really to collaborate closely across all three of the key entities to finalize the engineering and construction drawings, get an updated cost estimate, get the needed funding to actually do the building of that, the construction, do community outreach, and execute the construction as well. We're continuing the close collaboration with the Pikes Peak Library District, and the main points of contact for PPLD are listed on the chart. For grant writing and fundraising, we're going to try to cover as much of the cost as possible with raising funds through grants and a capital campaign, with a goal of getting all of the money if possible, all of the funds needed. Community outreach, the strategy for that group is to support a capital campaign through the development and implementation of this 2 or 3 year public relations plan with, as I mentioned, significant outreach to the community because we recognize the importance there. And then for the final subcommittee, the library expansion and ADA compliance, the goal of our subcommittee is really to help the project manager as possible and as appropriate to ease the demands on the city staff. So to do as much of this as possible. So we've done things like, besides sort of meeting and talking about how to move forward, we've also created a template for a detailed work breakdown structure and a high level schedule. And in the point paper that's included in the packet for tonight is an example of, a template of the kind of thing we're talking about there. And so the goal would be to sort of offload the tedious parts of putting that together and keeping that updated so that project manager Christine can execute from that. And we've also committed to providing updates every 60 days from here forward to City Council. We go to the next chart. So in the next 60 days, and again, this is the next 60 days for all members of the three-legged stool, not just the task force. So in terms of construction, Christine mentioned the planning department's planning to put out an RFP for final engineering construction drawings and get an updated cost estimate since it's been 3 years since the previous one. On fundraising, we plan to get a capital campaign consultant on board. And already we have people already talking to folks to get ideas, and we plan to get 3 bids with target of funding for this to be coming out of the Jane's bequest funds. And then finally on the city, not finally, but most importantly, on the City of Manitou Springs funding, this is really the most important part of the next 60 days. The city, we understand, is responsible for completing the match application, and my understanding is that's due in January, and we and the rest of the entire task force stands ready to assist in any way we can. But we want to be really clear that we're very confident that we can collectively make fundraising and a capital campaign successful, but we need matching funds for either a capital campaign or for fundraising for grants. My understanding of the current match approach is that it requires annual requests for funds, and frankly, that would undermine our fundraising efforts. We put together some examples of what you could do. So the next chart shows examples of what could be done with a city commitment of funds, starting with a long-term commitment from match funds. So this idea, and again, this chart is really just examples for illustration to show, and then the next chart has the calculations that come up with these numbers, which I'll go through as well. But if we go on the previous chart, Christine, just to the footstomp. So what we're saying here is with the estimate of the dollars, by the way, of $3 million is just a worst case estimate on my part. Those numbers aren't based on anything except my guess that it's going to go up from the last one, and this is kind of worst case. And then the numbers for the estimates on the loans, et cetera, came from we got some advice and guidance from the city finance director on that. But basically, when you run the numbers, it shows that if the city made a commitment to provide match funds for 15 years, we could use those, the city of Manitou Springs could use those funds to pay off a significant loan in the range of $650,000 to $800,000, or approximately 28% of the cost if you assume that the costs are around $3 million. If we go to the next chart, I'll show you the numbers of where we got that. And this is just really in there for reference, but to explain what it is. On the left is a table that just shows a 15-year loan with an interest rate of 2% and varying amounts of dollars and what would be the monthly and annual payments on such a loan. The blue match collection table, the first line of that is the city's estimate for match collection in 2021. And then the left column is the estimated total collection, and the right column is the 66% of that, since that's the total designated for the tier 1. And below that is below the 2021 estimate is just a range of possible annual collections from much lower to a little bit higher. And then on the right-hand side is a table that's titled Carnegie Portion Excursions. And this shows how much funding could be made available for Carnegie renewal, given 3 options for how a long-term commitment could be implemented. And again, this is not saying it needs to be any of these, this is for illustration. But it could either be a fixed amount of dollars, or it could be some specified percentage of the match collection. And again, if you look at the top line, that's using the 2021 estimate. And then the subsequent entries are for the range of possible match collection amounts. So if you look at the top line and the 2021 estimates, what you see is a fixed amount. And again, that's just a money, that's just something I put in there as a, whatever the city deems reasonable. And I put in $50,000 as just an example. And then the percentages, I used 2 examples. And I said, well, if you took a third of the tier 1 funds, that would be $73,000, at least in 2021. And a quarter of tier 1 would be $55,000, at least for 2021. And then the next chart is my final chart. And at this point, so we want to basically say thank you. We can go to the next one, Christine. Thanks. Acknowledge that the city has indeed come alongside and in strong partnership with the task force and the Pikes Peak Library District to execute this very much needed library renewal and expansion. And I want to reiterate sort of the key message from the task force, which really has 3 parts again. So first, the task force is committed and engaged, and we're working hard to allow the city to meet the needs of the community. Second, we're thrilled that the city's committed to restoring and renewing these iconic. Third, we'll dig in and offload whatever we can from the city and our overworked staff. But we acknowledge it's a city building and a city endeavor. But in closing, I want to basically emphasize that the next critical step is for the city to have commitment on long-term funding. And I really can't overemphasize that point because it's really key to success for the fundraising and the capital campaign. But we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Is Mr. Danny going to make comments at this point, or do we just want to open it up to questions?
No, I think Mary and Christine covered it very well. And
Okay.
we look forward to any questions or comments you may have for us.
Okay, good. So let's open it up to council for questions. Do we have any counselors who have questions for any of the library representatives? Okay. Okay, well, I do have a comment, and I believe that the match board has not had they haven't considered how to handle the funding for the tier 1 entities, which would include the library. I believe they're scheduled to do that this coming Thursday. So I think they should probably have an opportunity to discuss this, a little bit. I realize you've requested that we entertain the resolution at the next council meeting, which would be next week on the 15th. The way the schedules go, we wouldn't, I don't think we'd have input from the match board in time to get that into a council packet. So it seems to me that we'd really be looking at this at the earliest at our first meeting in January, which I believe is the 5th. I don't know if that creates huge problems for you. I don't know that there'd be, a whole lot of alternatives that we have. Christine?
Mayor, the resolution isn't specific to what the match board would provide or commit to. It would be more of a 40,000 foot elevations perspective on the project so that we could continue to put forward a capital campaign in the meantime.
Right. Okay. No, it's a good point. But Councillor Chandler, I'm sorry.
So just two quick questions. One is regarding the resolution. It's on page 22. So Christine, is that, I'll ask you this, is that why the match funds were specifically not addressed in any of the whereas statements in the body of the resolution?
That is correct. Yes, we
Okay.
just don't really know where that group will go, and what we certainly couldn't put to you any sort of request for a commitment or even indicate what kind of commitment City Council would be supportive of. So,
And my second question is, are we or are you settling in on the Thorpe design, or has that yet to be determined?
well, the discussion at the October meeting was moving in the direction of the Thorpe with any additional input that there may be out there. There will be a need to update the floor plan, take into consideration Councilor Woolbrook's award and any concerns that come that way. It's a great question. There are several folks in the community that do have some input and some additional thoughts outside of the task force and have requested to continue having conversations. And I am continuing to do that to ensure that all aspects of the community feel like they're represented.
Thank you. That's all I have.
You got things.
Can I add something real quick to that? Mayor Graham, I know you and I talked about this a little while ago, how do we move forward with the Thorpe plans? And as you may know, one of our task force members was able to locate two gentlemen who were working with Roger Thorpe on those plans back at the time that they were presented, I believe in 2017. And one is Joe Calvin and one is Dennis Humphreys. And they're both known through Roger Thorpe's architectural firm. They're familiar with the project. They have the plans. They were involved in the development, and they have additional information. I believe PPLD has worked with Dennis Humphreys. Anyway, we have, thanks to one of our task force members, as I said, been able to track down these two gentlemen, and we are meeting with them via Zoom tomorrow to have our initial discussion with how they may be involved in moving the project forward from the baseline of the Thorpe architectural drawings.
I believe Mayor Pro Tem was next. Mayor
Thanks.
Pro Tem?
Thank you. Just two comments. One, I appreciate your comment, Mayor, about the match, because it has not been, Tier 1 has not been decided how that's going to be implemented. And I just keep reiterating what a good group that match board is. And I have every confidence that they will take all the considerations of all 5 entities into consideration as they determine how that will be implemented. Secondly, I certainly have no problem with doing the resolution sooner rather than later. It does just document what we discussed previously with the task force and with Christine. So it's pretty straightforward. I find it to be very straightforward. So just, you know, a place and time, nothing controversial.
Thank you. Denise?
Mayor Pro Tem, can you give us the timeline that match is coming? Isn't it the end of January, 1st of February that they'll bring their suggestions back to council? That's kind of the time frame, or is it?
I believe that's it. I know that they just last week had information session, an educational section for the tier 2 grants. Denise, you were there. And they have done some discussion on the tier 1, but they've not really finalized very much. So I would give them some more time to discuss it in their group to bring that back to us. But I don't have a hard date on when that's going to be.
So I think it's like January, February, somewhere around there, because I believe the deadline is January 31st. I also want to mention that Becca, the finance director, and myself is working with our financial planner right now to figure out how we might be able to do this with both the library and Hiawatha. So we're gathering that information, and then we'll be bringing that back to both parties and to the council of all the options with our financial planner at that point. But that probably, again, is not going to be till January or February timeframe.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of discussion about, we talk about competitive grants. And in a city as small as Manitou, we really, I think everyone is very interested in working very collaboratively on this, as opposed to people working against one another. So the match committee board will continue to discuss that aspect of it as well.
And if we do a loan, we are talking whether we take 2 loans out or 1 loan out, because it's for the city of Manitou property. So there's a lot of discussion that our financial planners are doing some research on. And Becca and I are working closely with them, and we'll be bringing that in time. And we'll be keeping the Hiawatha and the library group informed as we do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Wolf? Oh, you're muted, Julie. Okay.
I do have something to say, but Susan's had her hand up for a while.
Well, I'm sorry. Okay, so Susan, and then we'll come back to Julie. Okay, Susan, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Julie. It doesn't matter much, but thanks. I just have a couple of questions that I don't necessarily need the answer to tonight, but they're sort of long-term questions. And I don't know how this works, but I think it's important that we ask this. I know that in this presentation, we talked about how the annual approach of allocating funds for match doesn't work for the plans that they're putting forward. But does the ballot language specify that it's an annual approach? No. Okay. So the ballot language doesn't stop that from match from saying, here's a 15-year plan, and asking city council to say, we're on board with a 15-year plan for the library. Is that correct?
That's
okay.
Correct.
So my only other concern about that is that if that happens, it's my understanding from the ballot language that match funds get approved by council every year annually, right? Even if there was a library, if one council makes a decision and says, hey, we're going to give, we've worked it out with match, but is another council beholden to that? I don't need the answer to that. And if that's a Jeff Parker question, we can bring that back. But I think that this has been one of the challenges about, the decades of library work and these feeling like there's this movement forward, and then through staff changes or council changes, it doesn't go forward. So I'd like to get out in front of all of these questions now, as this task force works towards a solution along with the city staff and planning. I'd really like to know what that looks like and explain that to the public, not just to council, but to the public. Like, if we make these changes, but council gets to approve match funds every year, and one example is we've withheld URA funds, and I'm not saying we're going to, but long after I'm on council, I mean, these things can happen, right? I mean, there can be a council who says, we need the match money this year, you can't have it. And it's a very complicated thing we're talking about. And I think it's important to be transparent about it. And it's important to look to the future and say that probably when this gets going, some of us won't even be on council anymore. It'll be new people. And we just don't know all these answers to these questions. So I'm really wanting that. I think one of the challenges that Rob Dannon made very clear to me was it's been decades of work. And it's very frustrating when you do this work and you go before a council and they say, we love this, move ahead. And the next council says, nah, it's okay, maybe, but we're over here on this area. So this is really something I think for the sake of this project, with as much effort as has been put in it for decades by volunteers, but certainly by city staff, this is something that needs to be very well understood and very well communicated to the public. So again, I don't need all these answers tonight, but it's something that I feel we have to start doing this the right way by explaining how this works to citizens, because a lot of times we just think on any number of topics that if one council says it's this way, that it's that way forever. In many cases it is, but it doesn't have to be. So that's my long-winded concern about that. And again, I just want to ask one question, and that is, so if you did city-owned property, Hiawatha Gardens and the Carnegie building is city-owned property as well as the land that it's on, whatever decision comes out of this, it still goes to the voters, even if it's a low-interest loan? No.
Not Early. So those are the things that the financial planner will be talking.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
when they put everything in place, we will have them come, because it really is the library and the Hiawatha. So it's both of those, and how do we approach it? And I will ask them to also talk about the question that you have, because I think you're going to have to make a commitment if we do a loan or a bond that you're going to do so much per year. So I'll have the financial planner as they're pulling this together and bringing that to you.
And then that seems logical that you would find a way to make that commitment without the match funds if possible, because I mean, to me, that would be the most strongest way to make a 15-year commitment, because it really kind of scares me to think that we would use the match funds that city council has to decide on every year. Just it's something to really think about. I think it's not a very, you talked about a 3-footed stool or whatever it was that you said at the beginning. That feels like it's about this thick and we're putting a lot of weight on it. And I'm feeling like that again goes back to decades of this task force moving forward and then getting, the leg kicked out from under them. That's the feeling they, I think, rightfully have. And I don't want to build a stool with a really weak leg. And this match thing feels that way to me, which is great to hear that the financial planners are going to be helping you guys look at this. And I'm sure they're very knowledgeable about looking at it from a long-term perspective and understanding which sources of funding are more stable than others. I appreciate that. My last comment is a huge shout out to this task force tonight for really recognizing Ward 1 and the neighbors of the library. It's really greatly noticed and appreciated, and I know that many of those people we're going to be on the call tonight. So I appreciate that. That's really wonderful. Thank you.
Councilor Wolf, I believe you were next.
Yes, this is a question for John Spears. And it's so fundamental that I'm assuming I've missed it, but just want to confirm. So John, and you're muted, John, so you reviewed this so-called Thorpe plan and you feel it would be appropriate, if the library someday ends up, renting this building again, which I realize, may or may not happen, but does it meet the library's needs as you might anticipate them to be for the next, 10 or 20 years? And part of that question is just this idea that fewer and fewer books are appearing in our libraries, and it's a whole different shift. So with respect to the size and the overall design, does that meet the library's needs?
The short answer, sorry, dog barking. The short answer to that is yes. The library was a part we worked with Roger and that entire team when they were doing the designs. And so as they were being developed, Margaret Morris, who was the branch manager at the time, Gary Seiling, our facilities manager, and then myself, we reviewed the plans every step of the way to make sure that it was something that we thought would meet our needs now and well into the future.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shada. Mr. Shada, you have the floor.
Yes, the other thing I'd like to ask about is, I believe that John, that you had told us before, the library district is typically purchasing facilities. Is that not true?
Actually, so we, of the 15 facilities that we have, we own 8 and we lease 7. So
Okay.
it's about a mix. Now moving forward into the future, it would be our hope in general that we could purchase materials. However, like most tax supported institutions, it's not something that we're necessarily capable of right now.
Well, and I guess I want to commend the task force thus far in terms of trying to do sort of a little financial pro forma. But what I'm concerned about is this, given that Julie asked the question, is the Thorpe plan, adequate for the library district's use? I guess I'm trying to figure out how we get a value that we can put into the financial pro forma in terms of what you guys would pay for rent for that, so that we can kind of understand, the financial, encapsulation of this, and what kind of a commitment the library district would be willing to make, since we're essentially expanding a city-owned facility as a library. We're not designing it to be general office space or a warehouse or room for the planning department or whatever. We're making a very specific design here. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we explore that kind of commitment and what kind of value that is to not only the library district, the time frame for the library district, so that we can kind of understand how we could kind of build that into the financial model.
But a lot of what we do whenever we renegotiate a lease is we look at it's pretty standard, like what most other organizations would do. We look at comparables in the area, and then we look at the state of the building, things like that. That's how we've done all of our other leases, and I think we could do something similar now, just as a projection, given what the square footage of the Thorpe plan would be in the future.
I guess
so we could come up with numbers. That's no problem.
I think that would be really helpful, because I think then that way we can put that into kind of the business planning model to kind of figure out, what's the, reasonable kind of, lifetime, of the building that the taxpayers of Manitou would be taking on as a commitment. And then essentially how committed is the library district as a partner. And then I think the community needs to be real, that if, let's say, the library district says, well, we can only make a 10-year commitment to it, then I think the city, the citizens of Manitou need to recognize that, we may need to take the library function back if we're going to kind of continue to kind of use this building as it's intended, because, there's no guarantee that, John, you'll be around in 10 years, or I will be, kind of like what Susan said, and decisions and library science and things like that change. So I just encourage, the task force and the city and whatnot to figure out how to kind of at least get some kind of a model in place as to how does the rent essentially help kind of pay for this.
If I could just say one thing really quickly to that, I think I've been a part of discussions with City Council, with the Manitou Springs City Council on this topic for 5 years. And throughout that entire 5 years, I think one thing that I hope we've demonstrated is a pretty unwavering commitment to having a facility in the city of Manitou Springs. We have had it in every intergovernmental agreement that we have entered into, including the most recent one. The one that just went into effect a few months ago. Within that, we did fully put in there our intention to remain in the city of Manitou Springs. I'll give a strange example of our commitment to Manitou Springs. When Manitou joined the district back in 2013, one of the things that we told them was that our levy would never be above 4 mils. And there actually are ways through some of the takebacks that were allowed that we could have a mill slightly above 4 mils that would, of course, affect all of El Paso County. We willingly have not done that because of a promise that we made to the residents of Manitou Springs that the mill would never be above 4. So I hope that there is enough trust between PPLD and the city of Manitou Springs to demonstrate that we are in this for the long haul, that we have no intention of leaving Manitou Springs. I could add on something of a joke that I'm the only person in the library district that has a residency requirement. So I would have to move if if you did take the library district back. So I have every intention of making sure that Manitou Springs stays in the Pikes Peak Library District.
Well, and I don't mean to suggest that we don't have a good commitment. I'm just trying to figure out how we financially model this relationship. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I don't think that would be difficult to do at all. I mean, we currently have, well, actually, I should say we have 7 leases because there's one with the MAC. And, those are all very standard with standard escalation factors. So it wouldn't be hard. If you would like, I could get our CFO together with the finance department of Manitou Springs. And I think it would be better now to have those discussions instead of later, because as you're looking at how this can be paid for, if you're going to be getting a fixed amount from the library district every year with an escalation factor, that should be factored into all of the costs that you're looking at moving forward. I do have to be honest, we are one of the few library districts that is still operating under Tabor. So because of that, we cannot legally, we can sign a 10-year lease, but there will have to be a non-appropriations clause in there. That's required by Tabor. If the city of Manitou Springs would like to help us de-Tabor, I would be more than happy to accept your help with that. But yeah, if you'd like, would it be appropriate for me to reach out to either Christine or Denise, and let's start that discussion now?
I'm just encouraging that discussion to go forward so that maybe in the next report, we can start to see some of that stuff, in the emerging kind of pro forma in terms of what it looks like.
If we do go forward, would it be acceptable to council that we use the Thorpe? Then I'm assuming we will definitely be using the Thorpe plans as the basis for that, because we'll need something to work off of. And the Thorpe plans seem to be what we're generally moving towards.
Well, I think the task force can answer that question. I'm just throwing, trying to bring this component into the modeling. That's all I'm trying to do right now from the get-go at the start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great point.
John, I think if you can reach out to Becca and I, Becca is really working with the financial planners, and we're going to get some of those numbers as they're pulling together the information that will be presented to council, probably, like I said, in the February timeframe of how we could do this with Hiawatha and the library both.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
May I also add, Council Shada, his remark about, up to the, depending on our thoughts on the Thorpe plans, just to restate that is definitely our intention. That's the baseline we've been working from the beginning. And as a matter of fact, at our October 13th work session with you, that was our #1 option that we brought forward, and that you discussed and were in agreement with, that we look at that as we move forward, which we have been using the Thorpe plans as our baseline. So we're in line with John.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Wolf, you've had your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Well, along those lines, I think it's kind of a chicken and the egg. This is actually for John Spears. And it's more of a comment, but I appreciate, although I can't imagine what comps you would use for that building. I mean, really, how speculative can you get? It's like you could come up with completely different random numbers and they're both fine. But anyway, that aside, it just seems to me that the library district, I don't want just to find out that, oh, we've decided that this, Carnegie building is worth X per square foot and therefore it's worth X per year. I think it's the other part of that analysis with your question about, are we assuming it's going to be the Thorpe plan, is this. If the library district feels like, geez, if the Thorpe plan would require us to pay that much rent to be in Manitou, that's not really in our budget with all of our other 15 libraries. So it might be reasonable to pay X dollars, but we ain't going to have that kind of money. Then maybe we need to know that now, because that might mean that we need to scale back our drawing. In other words, we don't want to give you like some palace kind of thing if that's not within your budget. So it's not just what would the Thorpe building require per month based on your comps. I would like to know, does that fit within PPLD's, future anticipated budget?
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I mean, I think that would definitely be a part of that discussion. If it comes out that we're going to be paying $200,000 a year for the building, that's probably would necessitate some
We'd have
hard
to cut
conversations. But even with the Thorpe design, the square footage of this library is still going to be. It's not going to be a palace of our libraries. It's actually going to be pretty much kind of, it will be pretty much right in line with one of our mid-sized libraries. I mean, this isn't going to be a 21C or an East or a Penrose. This is going to be a Rock Rimmon or a Ruth Holly, both of which we rent and both of which, we have financial projections for. When these discussions first started years ago, I mean, in the conversations I had with Mayor Nicoletta, with Mayor Giray, one of the things that we always did talk about was making sure that this was something that would be feasible for Pikes Peak Library District in the long term. And so I'll be honest, I'm really glad that we are having this conversation now, because I don't think this conversation can happen too soon in the process.
Well, in that case, if I might, it occurs to me that we might be jumping ahead a little prematurely here, because I don't want to pay $50,000 from the Jane's money to find out how much it's going to cost to build the Thorpe building. If the PPLD decides, damn, those comps are pretty high. Real estate is high in Manitou, especially for a historic building. It may be the same size as what you have on South 8th Street or whatever, but the price per square foot might be such that your financial person, your director says, we can't afford that. And if that's the case, we should know that. But it's like the horse before the cart or whatever. I mean, why would you pay all this money on the, do all this work with the RFPs to have all these places put in bids if we don't know if this is the building, in fact, price, if it's reasonable within the PPLD's budget? Is that because you already have an idea in your head about what the comps are?
Yes. Like I said, we've been in this process for 5 years. So, as through all of this, we've been working under the assumption that it would come in pretty much in line with what we're paying in some of our other similar facilities.
And what are you paying for the other mid-sized similar facilities?
It depends on the facility. Our most expensive facility by far is the Rock Rimmon Library. Part of that's probably just because of its location. And we pay, for most of our facilities, we pay probably anywhere between $90,000 and $170,000 a year. There are a few exceptions to that. One was what we were paying in Manitou, which was $12,000 a year. And then we have some that were free. Palmer Lake, for instance, that's something that the city has never charged us rent for there. Ute Pass, which is owned by the volunteer fire department up there, we pay about $6,000. So I'm leaving those out. They're kind of outliers. But for something like this, this is something that we are committed to doing and that we're planning to do. I cannot imagine the comps for Manitou coming in higher than Rock Rimmon.
Okay, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Council, are there any additional questions you have for the library folks? Looks like we've pretty well asked our questions. Denise? Yeah, Denise, you've got something.
I just want to reiterate that we have the Hiawatha and the library. So Christine is the project manager for the library. So we have two different groups that is working with staff. Then we have the Hiawatha, which Crystal, Chris is managing, and we'll be bringing that in January. But really, as we do loans and as we do financing, it's both of those are city property. And so we'll have to look at how we do that cohesively when we do that. We probably will not take out two separate loans. It will probably be one, but we don't know that yet. So there's a lot of things that have to take place regarding that financing part of it because they're both city owned.
Well, I would imagine that Hiawatha is going to be ready to go much sooner than the library. This library sounds like a huge undertaking.
There's still a lot of work to do with the Hiawatha also. And the library district, I mean, this group, I have to give them huge kudos to Christine and to Rob and Mary, because they're looking at doing a capital campaign, which is the way to probably fund this. So I need, you know, that is part of their plan, and to bring on a consultant to really help, because they're needing quite a bit of money, and that's a great way to manage that. So kudos to the group.
Thank you. The library folks have, of course, asked for a resolution, that we consider a resolution at the next regular meeting. I guess maybe we need to get some direction on that tonight. We obviously, we've got the Hiawatha Gardens we will be hearing about in January. You know, the match people haven't talked about how they want to handle this. So me personally, I'd be probably inclined to hold off on the resolution and look at it in early January, but I'd like to hear from other members of council. Councilor Wolf?
The resolution just says, keep on going, rah, rah, rah. There's no commitment. So I see absolutely no reason, with all due respect, Mayor, to do this to these people. It just, I mean, there's not one little phrase. You know me, I'm so picky about every little sentence. There's nothing in there that makes any commitment. It's just fluff. I mean, I hate to make it sound like it's not important, but it's fluffy. It's nothing that we could ever get in trouble for violating. It just says, it gives me good vibes, keep up the good work. If you were to paraphrase it, that's what my reader died. So I'd be in favor of going forward next week, as long, you know, it shouldn't take too much time.
Well, let me put it this way then. I'm going to ask all council members who'd like to see this on the agenda next week to raise their hand and say aye. We've got 4. Okay, so we have councilors Wolf, Chandler, Shada, and Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. So we can put this on the agenda for next week. All right, thank you. Well, I think that concludes the presentation. I guess I would like to give the library folks a chance to make any final comments. So Mary, Rob, John, Christine, if you have any remarks, this would be a good time.
I have one quick one. I'd just like to commend Christine Mullenberg, who has been an absolute pleasure to work with and has thrown herself into, into let's be honest, into something that is very contentious in the city of Manitou Springs. There's a lot of passions on every side. Even, I mean, everyone wants what's best for the library and what's best for Manitou Springs. I just want to say Christine has been absolutely amazing to work with, has been on top of everything, very involved. And I want to thank the city for kind of having her be our main point of contact, because it's been truly wonderful to work with her. And Rob and Mary, you're awesome too, but you know, I want to kind of throw Christine.
No, I was just going to say +1 for everything you just said. We couldn't have said it better. So I totally agree.
Can we make that +2?
Maybe we can.
And I just also want to say that the people from our task force that you see before you, we're just a fraction of the people that work with us on a daily, weekly basis on all of this. We're just representing everybody's within our task force's efforts, and they're to be commended as well. We feel very fortunate, as John was saying, to work with Christine. And we look forward to speaking with all of you again formally in 60 days.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We'll have this prepared to include in the agenda for next week. And you know, we're trying to game plan and strategize all the potentials, all the what ifs, and anticipate speed bumps, which there will be certainly some along the way. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Christine, John, Mary, Rob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you in 60 days, okay, if not sooner.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Council, we've been at it for an hour. The next item is the Mountain Metro community process, talking about the shuttle buses, basically. Not sure how long that'll take. We were thinking it'd take maybe 20, 30 minutes. I guess, does anybody want to take a break now? And okay, it looks like we got support. So maybe a 10-minute break. I've got 7 o'clock straight up right now. So let's be back at 7:10. All right, thank you. See you in 10 minutes. Tonight is the Mountain Metro community process. So it's time to talk about shuttle service. I think, Roy, I believe you're going to lead off on this, please.
Yes, sir. So Mayor and City Council, tonight, like the Mayor indicated, we're going to talk about the Mountain Metro service. What's important, of course, is the public process will begin in January, and we need to send in our proposal of any changes by December. So this month, and then it goes through the public process in January, and then implementation in April. So it's important that we have some suggestions from you on council on what else we would like to do. As a reminder, the background, some of the highlights is that the shuttle service, probably one of the bigger ones, is that it has been very successful. The use of it has increased over the years. It does help with congestion, and based on the Transportation Parking Board, they support the shuttle use. They feel it has helped a lot in the traffic control and congestion downtown. Also, on a side note, with some of the studies I looked at, shuttles also, for every shuttle, about 20 cars are pulled off the road. So from a environmental standpoint, shuttles do protect it. And then with 20 less cars in the community driving around, it can help with some of the congestion as well. So we all know the fiscal impact that was all covered in that PowerPoint. The biggest thing we have to look at here, we did have these questions, and the TMMP got together and asked Mountain Metro, especially some of the ones that the council brought together before at the last meeting. So one of the big ones is probably number 36, the year round. I did get a price for that for $265,500. We could go year round with that service. And then if we look at probably the last one, trying to figure out if we could include the west side of town a little better. There was the question, could 36 go to the Serpentine roundabout instead of the Ruxton roundabout, and be able to possibly pick up passengers on the west end of town and drop them off in that area as well. And actually that is something that could work, and maybe even reduce a little congestion in the roundabout at Ruxton because it's going to be smoother for the bus to go straight through, in a sense, instead of going around that circle. So, but Mountain Metro was positive on that one. So at this point, really tonight is wanting to know, what of these, do we want us to pursue any of these questions further? Or do you have other questions or ideas that you'd like to see with the shuttle service? And we could bring Brian Vituli over, who can also give, real answers right now on the spot, possibly. So Judy, if you want to, Brian, if you can raise your hand in the audience, we'll bring him over, and we'll do some question and answer session.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Shea, I see your hand up. Let's get Brian on board here, and then we'll give you the floor. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first question or comment it appears it's coming from Councilman Sheda. Councilman Sheda?
Yes, I was kind of interested in what is the percentage of people who are riding Route 33 that go to the Incline versus are going to other destinations? Do we have any numbers or statistics on that?
I don't have those numbers now. No, we just have the ridership numbers that we share with Roy.
Can we find those numbers? Can we find that, or do we have to do a study on that, or what?
No, I said that we provide monthly ridership to Roy on the seasonal services, but also the year-round 33 service. But that is just ridership that's carried. We don't have, origin and destination data for each of those passengers, but we can do, and we have given before, ridership by stop data, but it's not telling us where people are coming from or where they're going to.
Is there a possibility of doing a study to figure that out?
What is the question you're trying to answer?
I'm trying to figure out is how much of a burden it is on the taxpayers of Manitou Springs to provide shuttle service for, in particular, the Incline. And given that we have only the Incline running right now, okay, and the Cog Railway won't run next summer, seems like to me now is a really clear time to get an idea as to what that looks like.
Well, what we've been saying all along is Route 33 is not a service primarily for incliners. There are bar trail users that use the service. There are residents along Ruxton or residents who are traveling further west into Manitou Springs who can use it. And like you said, COG users. I wasn't aware that the COG Railroad wasn't going to open in 2021. That's been delayed.
It's not. No, my point is it's not open right now.
Right,
So
but it will be next summer.
It's easier to figure out what's going on right now.
Well, that kind of taints the results you're hoping to get, right? Because we don't have a true picture of ridership if the COG is not running.
No, it tells us right now what's going on. Okay. So what I want to know is that, or I am not going to be in favor of continuing to do this Route 33 because my experience is this is primarily for incliners. This is from somebody who lives here in this town and who takes that route and looks at what people do in getting on and off. And this is from somebody who has spent an entire lifetime using public transit. So I want to know what this percentage is. Okay, I want to know whether it's 60%, 90%. I want to figure out how we get there. Does the city have to pay for that kind of study? Okay, can you guys do it? How do we derive that data?
Well, we don't have the funds right now, nor the time or the resources to do the type of survey that you're looking into.
Okay, well, no, then I'm going to ask, can we as a city do that by basically having somebody on the bus, derive that data?
Brian, can you give us just the number of people that get off at each stop? Can you give us the last 30 days or 60-day average of every stop for 33? How many people get on and how many people get on and off at each stop?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I have provided that to Roy. If Roy could look through his files, he should be able to find the ridership by stop data that we provided already.
Okay, I think that may help us. So we know how many people get on at a certain place, get off, get on, get off. Okay. I think if we can pull that information, Councilor Shada, and then present that, I think that may be getting the question that you want answered.
That may get us closer. Thank you.
You bet.
So I'll plan on getting that information. If I'm missing any, Brian, I'll reach out to you on any months and I'll see if I can't put it together some data that get us some information close to that at least and see if that works.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Mr. Shada again?
Yes, I have a follow-on question, and I believe this has to do with a concern that Councilor Chandler had, which is the service for Route 36. And I think one of the questions that we were trying to ask was, can we meet some of the needs for some of the service needs from the Becker's neighborhood using the Route 3 bus? Is that not correct, Judith? I mean, help me with this.
Yeah, so everyone knows I'm a big fan of wanting that 36 shuttle to run year round, especially given Roy's perfect intro about how many cars get taken off the road when we have a shuttle service. And I also am a fan of the 36 shuttle proceeding all the way to the Serpentine turnabout. And we talked briefly, several months ago, in COVID years, about seeing if the 3 shuttle could take care of some of that. But I think, as I remember, that was a no. So, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was not possible or feasible.
Well, Route 3 is not a shuttle. Route 3 is the mainline service that comes from downtown Colorado Springs and ends at Old Man's Trail at Hiawatha Gardens. So that is not one of the shuttle services. Is that what you were referring to? I mean, that stays on Colorado Avenue and Manitou Avenue.
So it just came up in conversation before when we were talking about shuttle service several months ago. But since we're on this topic, I'm a proponent of shuttle service wherever and we can get it in this town. And I think it's really time to look at having the 36 shuttle be a year-round service bus that goes to all the way to Serpentine Drive as part of its route.
Well, yeah, as Roy said in his introduction, if the council chooses tonight to move forward with extending Route 36 to Serpentine, that is something we can certainly do with the April service change. It would go to the public in January for public meetings, and it would be implemented at the end of April when the 36 returns for its seasonal service. And so that's kind of a win-win. There's no additional cost involved. It's just extending it, 4/10 of a mile west to Serpentine. I think we can still maintain very close to that 20-minute frequency. So I think that's a low-hanging fruit. That would be a great positive improvement. The only thing, and this is not a question you need to answer now, but if you do choose to pursue operating Route 36 year-round, we could take that to the public as part of our fall service change. So we would have public meetings in June or July, and then the fall service change is usually implemented at the end of September. And that's right when Route 36 ends for the season. So if, in the coming months, if you decide that's what you want to do, you have the funds to operate it year round. That's what we could go to the public with in July. And the price that Roy gave you, that is correct. It's about $265,000 a year. That would be for a full year. So that would be, say, starting in 2022. The cost for 2021 would only be, whatever it is for the seasonal period that you normally operate it. But then it would just be for October, November, and December. So it would be less, but for 2022, you would need to budget for that $265,000 if that's what you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple questions. One is that the mobility study the TMMP that we did obviously said that public transport was really what the community come back and said they wanted to, that was the number one priority that the community came back that they wanted to improve within the city. So I'm excited about anything that we can do in support of that. And other than that, I don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so bear with me. I know that in my ward, which includes Crystal Hills and the Villas, some people have expressed, as well as half of Becker's Lane, people have expressed about getting more public transportation in that area. I have no idea if that's just like, 3 people or if there's a bigger need for it. And I don't know if that's something that the community outreach would be looking at. So that's one issue that I had. 2 is, we've talked previously about potentially charging for the use of the shuttle. So I just wanted to see if the Transportation and Mobility Board had weighed in on anything on that, or if that's something that we should address or not. And thirdly, Brian, this is specifically for you, and that is, I am very, very concerned about getting any community engagement. We've had a couple of opportunities for the community to weigh into Zoom, and like nobody comes to our Zoom meetings when it's public. So I'm very worried about trying to do this in the December, January timeframe and getting any sort of quality input from the community. So those are the three things that I wanted to raise. And given that it's twice a year, Brian, I guess, would it be better to wait and see how COVID, or should we, barrel ahead and try to, I just don't know. So there you have it. Thanks.
Well, I can give you a short answer to that. I think investigating a reroute of Route 36 into other neighborhoods is something that we can't really do with this timeline to have it go to the public in January. I think that's probably, we can all digest this and look at it over the next couple months and perhaps have it be part of the fall service change and the public process in July. But I do think the extension of Route 36 to Serpentine is certainly something good to take to the public. And our city communications team, I mean, we have still been doing projects. We've still been having public input for projects. So we do have a pretty good model for trying to get public feedback. What we did with our fall service change just a couple months ago is, I recorded a video with a PowerPoint presentation, and it was, distributed to the public using normal channels and a lot of social media and our website. And, it was a non-controversial service change. So usually we don't get a lot of people come to those. And this is kind of what I would think would be for this service change. An extension of a route to serve, the western part of Manitou Springs, I think is a very positive thing. And, usually you only hear from the people who have objections to it. And, I don't think there would be any issue with moving forward with that. But the bigger questions of, do we serve other neighborhoods? Do we do it year round? I think that could certainly wait for later this summer or next summer.
And Roy, what about the TMP or whatever they're calling themselves, the Parking and Mobility Board? Have they made any recommendations on paying, pay for use, individuals paying for use?
So far, it's been not looked at favorably. They just feel the shuttle use will decline with charging for it, and that if you get, it's better to charge for the parking itself and not penalize, in a sense, a shuttle service that's been free for years. So far, that's what we're getting the feel for. So,
Councilor Wolf.
Oh, so I have a question about the public engagement process. Are you required, Brian, or are we required, or you help us to put out to the public specifically what, if any, changes are being proposed, and then there's a scheduled meeting? And do I get it correctly that if there is a decision later to increase the amount of service provided, we don't have to go through the public process, but if we subsequent in the year, depending what happens with COVID or whatever, or our budget or whatever, we can never decrease the amount of service provided without going through the whole public engagement routine again. Is that right? Do I understand that?
Mostly, yes. We have to have public process, whether we're discontinuing service or changing a routing or adding service. So the second part of your statement, if you decided to add service, we wouldn't have to have a public process. That's not true. We do have to have public process. And the first part of your comment, we handle all of the public process. And all we ask is if you have staff, since you do have an item that is going to be presented to the public, if you have a staff member, whether that's Roy or Denise, just come with us, virtually, and express your support. Say it's a joint effort to extend Route 36 further west into town. That would be something that would go over favorably. But yeah, we'll take care of all of the public process. You could share the information on your city website or any social media outlets that you use, but we'll handle all of that.
Councilor Wolf, another question?
Yes, I have another comment. I don't know if it's a
Go.
question, but I'm interested in potentially terminating the 6 to 8 p.m. Route 33 from January through March. And it's my understanding the ridership on that is limited. Now, I also understand that Susan mentioned that she knows at least one person who uses that. And so I would like there to be extensive social media, whatever, encouraging people to participate in the upcoming meeting, that Brian is going to be organizing, and to see, in fact, how many people think that that's a crucial bus to keep going during that time, because it seems like it's not used. And I don't want to pay for it for nothing, and it's noisy, and it still does pollute the air when there's nobody on it. So is that's something I'd really like to have be part of the public engagement but I don't understand the process. Is that something that requires a majority vote of council, or can just any old idea be brought forward through Brian?
Well, a little correction there. The city of Colorado Springs pays for the 6 to 8 p.m. service from January to March.
Okay.
So you don't pay for that, we do.
Can we just use that money for something else? You can pay for something else, that we don't have to have that bus driving around like silly, empty all the time, polluting the air.
Well, no.
It's like, thank you for the freebie, but can you just help us in some other way, please?
Well, when you discontinue service over part of the year, it kind of gets confusing to the public. And, we've been operating it from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the last several years. And when you start changing up the hours, depending on, the months, it does get confusing. And I'll go back to my statement to Councilor Shada earlier that, there are other users besides the incliners. There could be bar trail users, or there could be residents or somebody else who's going up there.
I agree, Brian. That's why I thought we should have more heavy engagement, because it looks like there's a bear behind you, Brian.
That's just my cat.
Oh. Okay. I lost my train of thought because it really looked like a bear to me. Even if you pay for it, I don't like it. And so I don't think it's that confused. How does this work? So if you think it's confusing, then we have to accept it, or is it still up to us? I don't know. It'd be nice if you could give us the benefit some other time within some other way. Or can you just send at least the electric bus for those 2 hours then, so we're not polluting the city for no reason? 2 hours, 7 days a week.
Well, if it is, we like to work together with you. I've stated that I think it should be consistent hours throughout the year. So are you saying if you want it discontinued from 6 to 8 p.m. in January through March, or actually through later April until the service change, that you also want to not have it run from October through December?
Well, I hadn't even gotten that far in my thought process.
That's what we need to think
I'm just saying, if you want to add that to the public meeting, that's fine. But I'm just saying, for me, for the public meeting, I would like that on the agenda. But I might be the only one, and I'm also just trying to learn about the process. So I still don't really have an answer to my question. I know you like to work with us, and we're always about partnership, But who gets to decide at the end of the day? That's my question. Do you know what the answer is, or?
Yes, I've been trying to explain the answer. I don't think it's working too well, but if you choose to have this as part of the public process in January, it's too late anyways, because that service will not be implemented until the end of April. So we can't, right now, we just can't flip a switch and say Route 33 is not going to operate from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. That should have been part of the fall 2020 public process. So the public process that we're going out in January for, that's for changes to take effect at the end of April. So it's too late for consideration of what you're asking about now.
Okay, so everything is about 6 months in advance?
Well, we have 2 service changes a year. So yep, January and July. And the implementation dates of those are usually at the end of April and the end of September.
Okay, so I think your answer is it's up to us, and because of some policy or something, and no, you can't do that. It's too soon. You could do it for the fall, you could do it for July or whatever. You can't do it now. Is that?
Yeah, that would be another thing for you to think about for our fall service change. If you don't want Route 33 to operate from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. starting at the end of September 2021, yes, you would need to tell us that also for our summer public process. Yeah.
And do you require a majority vote of council on that, or is that just any individual citizen can call you and ask for input to have that on the agenda?
Well, we would like for, the recommendation or consensus to come from you, from council, since you will be, you're kind of the decision-making body. But of course, this does go to the public, and depending on the feedback we get from the public, if there are a lot of customers who say, no, we want it to continue to 8 p.m., we'll share that feedback with you, and we'll have to make a decision then.
Right. And if there are a lot of people who feel that way, I would love to know that.
Mhm.
And that's why I thought if we could really be a little more aggressive in our public engagement, because Councilor Warburg has indicated that this is a big issue with residents, and you've indicated there are a lot of residents. They've never come before council, nor have I ever met any of them. So I'm just wondering, where are they? Let's reach out to them and see, are there 2? It might be cheaper for us to give them a year-round pass to Uber than to, I just want to see how many people. So thanks for answering my questions.
Sure. And the ridership information that Roy is going to find, the ridership by stop, that will give you an idea of where people are boarding, and, even by time of day. So you'll be able to see, there's no doubt that, ridership in the evening does lighten up. But, it's a question that we need to ask, those are still customers and they are still using that service. So do you really want to go there? Yeah.
And maybe as a compromise with some of our residents who oppose all the pollution, just seeing this, it's almost like the feeling you get when you see someone idling their car for 45 minutes. It makes me nuts, I just want to scream at them, turn your car off. What are you doing? But anyway, just to see this empty thing driving around, at that point, maybe Manitou wants to look at the cost of renting or converting or buying, well, not buying yet, because I understand the battery thing, but to look at the electric buses that we were educated about by you and your staff. So, it's just something to look at. Okay, thank you.
So both Denise and Steve have had their hands up. Steve, I don't think you've spoken all night, so let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if Colorado Springs is paying for any of the service anymore.
Yes, we are.
How much?
Well, I shared that with you at the end of September, and Roy's memo for tonight's item has those costs highlighted in there.
When I look at the agenda item, it shows before COVID-19, Manitou Springs was to pay $314,337. I thought that sounded like pretty close to the amount for the shuttle for the whole year. So I didn't see anything for Colorado Springs paying in that.
Well, the city of Colorado Springs pays for Route 33 to operate year round. So we pay for the service from October through December and from January to March. The city of Manitou Springs, in a normal year, that $314,000 pays for the seasonal service for Route 33 and Route 36, including, that 10-minute frequency of Route 33 in the summer. And you also pay for, no, that's it. I believe that's it. Yeah, so that
So,
$314,000.
Manitou Springs pays $314,000. And how much does Colorado Springs pay? Because I don't see that in here.
I don't know. It was in the PowerPoint that we presented to you at the end of September. I don't have those numbers on me, but
Okay.
it's a considerable amount. It's part of the coordination was to make Route 33 operate year round. And we are paying for that off-season service. Not factored into that is the frequency of Route 3 coming from Colorado Springs. You have 30-minute weekday service. You have 30-minute Saturday and Sunday service. So you are well represented in the transit realm.
Okay. Steve, did you have additional questions or comments?
No.
Okay. I think Denise, I believe you were next.
Yeah, and I will just do a quick update, and I'm not at work, so I can't pull my file, but I'm looking through an email, and in April, I sent to council, it looks like Route 33, I believe, the cost is $362, a little bit extra. The city of Manitou pays $201,723, and the city of Colorado Springs contributes $160,888. And I can verify that, but that was an email that I sent earlier regarding that. So that's what I looked like, but I can verify it, and Roy can verify that to make sure. And that was sent in April, but I can confirm the numbers. So Brian, I just wanted to check if they want to change the hours for that October, November, December, January. When do we have to take that to the public? When do we have to let you know?
June, May or June would be good.
Okay, so we need to put it on our calendar that we would need to get back with you in May if that was something that council wanted to do.
Yes, and if you're looking to, if you're looking for advice on how to change Route 36 to serve other neighborhoods, like you suggested earlier, we would need a little bit of time to analyze that and figure out a routing. So letting us know earlier would be better. But our proposal to the public would likely go out late May, early June for public meetings to happen either in late June or July. So if it's just continuing Route 36 to operate year round, that's an easy thing. I mean, we don't really have to analyze that, but if you're looking for suggestions on how to serve Crystal Hills or, other neighborhoods, we're going to need some time to look at that. So the earlier the better.
I'm just asking for some time so that we make sure, so Roy knows the time frame. Is that like April then you need to know that, or is that like March?
Yeah, April would be good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Brian, I do have a question real quick, following off Ms. Wolf's question about the 6 to 8 p.m. time. And if this question was already asked before, I apologize for a repeat, but can they go to a smaller shuttle or van? Do you guys have those for the 6 to 8 p.m. period? So at least if it's less people, then maybe that's a possibility.
Yeah, the 29-foot vehicles that we run on 33 and 36, that's our smallest fixed route bus.
Okay.
We have our ADA paratransit service, but that's under a different contractor, and we don't have any smaller vehicles than the buses that are out there right now.
Okay.
Good question though.
Tim? Mayor Pro Tem?
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we've learned tonight. And it seems like what we could act on for this go around is extending 36 to Serpentine Roundabout. That's the only thing at this point that makes a lot of sense. And then we've got, as a city, we've got quite a bit of work to do in terms of crunching some numbers and so on to come back to you next spring with any additional recommendations we might have. Is that how I'm hearing this, Brian?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay. So I would certainly propose then that we go ahead and, because it does sound like a good thing to extend that 36 up to Serpentine. There's no additional cost. It would reduce some potential chaos at the Ruxton Roundabout, and it doesn't sound like it would be controversial with the public at all, so I don't have to worry about my community engagement issue. Thanks.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is, if we could work, if that's the direction you want to go and it goes through the public process, before the late April implementation of that, when the 36 restarts service again for the summer, if we could just work with you, Roy, and your staff, we would want to get the placement of a few bus stops, west of Ruxton,
Right.
out to Serpentine, located. And we usually, we'd like them to be where there are good pedestrian facilities. And, I don't know if that means, the elimination of a couple parking spaces so our bus can get to the curb, or maybe we could do it at where your bump outs are or something like that. But we would just need to work with you to find out good locations for our bus stops.
Yeah, I just had a thought too, but hopefully, we'd have to see. I have to talk to Jeff and Dole because the MAPS project will be starting up, and maybe pushing it out there at that time might be a mistake until that MAPS project is completed. So we have to think about that, because that's going to start this fall. It's already started some things, and we'll go into next spring about May or so. So depending on weather. So that will be challenging at this point. Just thought about it. So
I do want to mention Dole, I think, wants to come over. I know Mr. Shada's hand, or Councilor Shada's hand is up, but I believe Dole would like to come over.
I think I saw Councilor Wilberg's hand up also. I think Susan was first, so if we could do Susan, then John, and then Dole. Susan?
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of comments that I have to make about this is that, one, things like public transportation, city pools, golf courses, ice rinks, they're not sustainable on their own. Municipalities fund them because they try to meet needs in a community, and they know that they're not going to pay for themselves. So on one hand, this is sort of the decision that we've made in the past to go with Mountain Metro and provide this service because obviously we feel like it's the right thing to do to solve certain issues that we want to solve. I don't want to discount the comments that were made here specifically tonight by Councilors Wolf and Shada, because I think their heart is in the right place. They're basically saying there's a lot of money we're spending, and we don't really know how many people are using it. And maybe there's better ways to spend that money or better ways to solve the problem. And I'm not saying either approach is right or wrong. I'm saying that there's validity to what they're saying, and that I would ask Roy maybe to champion the Transportation and Mobility Board into really tackling this issue with the Manitou approach. This is something I talk about at every council meeting because we want to be Manitou, creative and different. And sometimes I feel like we really slide into these boxed up solutions that everybody uses because we understand them better, even though they might not be the right fit for us. And what if we were creative? And I don't think giving Ubers to people who need them might be the solution, but how do I know that unless we really look at it, right? And what better place than Manitou to take some of these challenges and say, we're not Colorado Springs or any other place, Monument, Palmer Lake, even any place in El Paso County or wherever, and we're going to solve this problem in a different way. And I think that this would be a great opportunity for the newly minted named Transportation and Mobility Board to dig their heels in as an advisory board, and even reach out potentially to, you know, the counselors here tonight who have said, I know that generally municipalities provide these services and we have a great partnership with Mountain Metro in doing this, but are there other viable alternatives to solve this problem? You know, I think with COVID and a lot of what I feel to be economic uncertainty, I think the time is now to really look at that. And I don't mean to burden city staff with that, an extra thing, but city staff is burdened with the budget anyway. They're burdened with economic uncertainty and COVID. And yes, this is if you go and take a course in government, you know, or however you do it, this is what they tell you to do, is do the things that we're doing. Maybe it is the right thing. And maybe we come away from that and say, okay, it still is. But I think we have an advisory board. We don't have to hire somebody to do a study necessarily. I like the idea of engaging some of these volunteers. Let's look at that. I just think it's important for us to think about that tonight. And I just wanted to really try to wrap that together with their comments. Thank you.
Jade, I think you're next. John?
Sorry about that. Had to find the mute button. Golly, I forgot. I forgot what my question was. I'm really sorry.
Okay. Well, so let's go to Dole, and then if you think of it, raise your hand again, John.
Oh,
okay?
no, I do. I do remember. I do agree with Roy that maybe the time to kind of go all the way to Serpentine with all this construction isn't a great time. So maybe a compromise is just to send it to the Ruxton Turnabout.
Okay.
Oh, but can I just segue on into that? I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be a better idea to have the bus go to Serpentine Drive during the construction to minimize the number of cars that would otherwise try to park up there. So I'm of two minds on that, because there will be traffic going through there. So I don't know that it's a bad time to do that either.
Maybe Dole can answer that, since he's working on the MAPS project, on how many delays will occur in that area during construction and mud.
No delays.
Okay, you've got the floor, Dole. You solve all the problems.
Just to clarify, Brian, assuming Manitou followed the timelines and schedules correctly, when could the service be extended to Serpentine? What would be the fastest in meeting all the deadlines?
Well, if it's part of our January public process, it would be implemented at the end of April.
Okay. So now would probably be a terrific time then, if that was the direction the city wanted to go, which I'm in favor of, because I think I may have made the recommendation to Roy when we looked at this originally. Now would be the time to look at the MAPS project, and while the sidewalks and curb and gutter are being torn up, to look at some key locations. And if nothing else, Brian, maybe we could work with some experts in your office and identify some key locations. And if there was some way for us to, because we are going to have 10-foot sidewalks, but having a bench or stop or some other, amenity there can restrict that. So we would just need, now would be the time for us to go and pick a couple of key spots and just identify them. And if we needed to just widen something out or leave something undone or something along those lines, now would be a terrific time while we have the contractor under contract, but we have not started their work yet. So that could work okay.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess that is the question. If if you're confident that when we start service at the end of April, that passengers, customers will have good pedestrian facilities to access the bus, with bus stops, I would be certainly in favor of doing that. But if there's a question that area is still going to be torn up, I don't know. I don't think it would be a good launch, really. And that's more a question for you as far as the schedule of the project. But I'd be glad to work with you, and we can go out and identify some bus stops, certainly.
Well, and of course, I don't know exactly where the project will be around those times, and that's a good question. But I know Paso County is really wanting to be more proactive with Rainbow Falls and doing a better job managing the lack of parking. They said that they have 500 to 600 visitors on a peak day, and they have 9 parking spots. So part of the thought was, as the Creek Walk Trail system develops and travels up the creek from Serpentine up to Rainbow Falls, that shuttle could be a great way to get people from our more efficient, more available parking facilities, and then maybe shuttle them up to Serpentine, and then maybe they have to walk up to Rainbow Falls, or something like that. But I could even see us putting in a stop, and we would need to look at the legality of this. But I guess you probably couldn't put a stop actually in the roundabout. But I'm sure we can find something that works for your system, for your vehicles.
Joel, did you have any other comments there, Joel? Or
I don't think so.
okay,
Thank you.
all righty, good. Council, well, we've talked this one out pretty well. Are there any closing thoughts here? I guess, Brian, do you have questions for us?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to confirm that that is what you would all like to see go out in our proposal, is to propose extending Route 36 further west to the Serpentine roundabout.
Okay. I guess that was my general sense of the way the conversation was going. Is anybody feel differently? Councilor Wolf?
Oh,
Julie?
can I just make sure, Brian, so if we were to switch over at some point to using one of your electric buses, is that something we'd have to give you like a 2-year advance notice for? Or how does that piece work? And does that go to the public process as well? Or is that just, if our budget can afford it, you'll make it happen?
Well, that's kind of what we discussed at the end of September, that, we are doing a small pilot of electric buses. And, we have said that Route 3, the line from downtown Colorado Springs, could be a good candidate for that, but likely not for the 33 or 36, depending on, the range, or how big the batteries are, and how much range we could get on those vehicles. But yeah, we did leave it that, the city of Manitou Springs could explore purchasing or leasing an electric vehicle, and that could be added for those services. So that's kind of more of a conversation that you all need to have amongst yourselves.
And who decides if we get to be part of your pilot project? Is that up to you?
Well, it's all of our staff. We're analyzing routes, and we're collecting data on all of the routes that operate in our system, and the folks that we're contracting with for the electric buses, Proterra, they have software that can model the elevation changes of our routes, and kind of predict how many miles can be operated on one charge. So it's kind of dependent, with only 4 vehicles that we're getting in for the pilot, it's going to be pretty limited, and we'll probably try to move them around our system as much as we can. But we have said in the past that Route 3 would be a good candidate to test, because it is it follows the it follows the creek basically. And, it's a slight elevation gain going from downtown Colorado Springs to Manitou, but then you have a little bit of a descent going eastward. So but it is, not much elevation changes, and it could be a good route to test it on.
So if we had a charging station, say at Hiawatha, would that facilitate or be at all helpful in making that happen? Or is that the kind of thing where, it'd have to be charging all night long or, for a 12-hour period anyway?
Well, no, that's a great question because, there are two different ways to charge the vehicles. You can do a slow overnight charge, and that's kind of the direction that we're doing for our pilot. With the vehicles that we're getting, we are ordering the slow chargers to put at our indoor storage facility. But there's another option that some other agencies are using to put at their outlying transfer stations. So when a bus reaches the end of the line and it's laying over waiting for the return trip, it can get a quick charge. And, depending on the success of our pilot, and if we, intend to roll it out through our entire fleet over, so many years, maybe we will investigate the fast charge technology. But right now, we're kind of just going with the slow charges for this pilot. But yeah, that's a very good question. And if Hiawatha Gardens ever gets built and we ever expand our fleet to all electric buses, that could be something that could be a good conversation to have, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, real quick, Brian, the electric buses are like twice as much as a standard diesel bus, right? What does that cost then?
They're, right around $1 million, a little over $1 million. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's for a 40-foot electric bus, and those are the ones that obviously have the most range on them because the batteries are larger or they have more batteries. But they do make some smaller buses, and there are some properties that are running smaller electric vehicles. But it has to be a good fit for the environment. It has to be able to either top off the charge with each trip, or maybe the route just doesn't cover very many miles and you're able to cover it with the range that the bus has. But yeah, the 40-foot buses are a little over $1 million, and that's double the price of a diesel bus.
Thank you.
Sure.
Brian, thank you very much for the information you've given us and the help and so forth. We appreciate the ability to express our concerns to you and get some feedback and that sort of thing. So
sure.
Again, thank you very much. I hope you didn't have to drive too far to get to the meeting.
No, I'm at home. Right here in Manitou Springs too, by the way.
You're a Manitou resident. Yeah, I thought that was worth pointing out. So you have a vested interest in relieving congestion and traffic problems. So great. All right. Well, you're one of us. We thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks,
Take
Brian.
care. Okay, let's move on to the next item. The last item for discussion tonight is the summary of the Incline, end of the year Incline summary. Dole, I believe you're going to be the point man to get us started here.
I sure am. And in the council agenda item, I just provided some kind of basic charts, and I didn't know if everyone has had a chance to review those, if they've had a chance to come up with some questions. I'm just kind of here we can kind of give a brief synopsis, but I think that we've been sharing the meeting minutes from our meetings with Colorado Springs. We were here a little while ago asking and getting approved the reduced Incline attendant hours and attendees to reflect the shorter season. And so we're just kind of here to kind of do a wrap up with you all and reflect on the previous year, I think.
Thank you. Let's open it up to questions from council or staff.
Joel, could you just do a quick overview of kind of how the reservation system has worked and how you've seen that it decrease, and especially since you've decreased the hours?
Sure. Judy, is it best to maybe have you pull up one of the slides? I think the 3 graphs, what's the best way to do that?
I can do that if you'd like to tell me which one.
We'll just do all 3 of them. And I think, Denise, that'll answer your thing, because what I tried to do in those, and first of all, this is a big thank you to the City of Colorado Springs, because they continue to, I actually have, Roy has an account to the system, so we can log in and get data and track data and manipulate data. And it's very generous of them to get to, for us to get to use that system. So we appreciate that. It's very helpful as Roy and I are asking questions of the data and looking at trends and stuff, to be able to hop in and just do it ourselves.
So I'm just starting with the first one that was loaded up. If that works for you, the order.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so this is perfect. These are in the right order. So this is kind of a macro look at the historic usage of the Incline, and each data point was a month. So you can kind of see how back from January 17, you can see how the Incline closed late fall of 17. I think they did some repairs that year. But you can see how the not only the peak of the curve, but the width of the curve was slowly getting bigger, which meant more people were coming, and then more people were coming per month. And then you can see here on the far right side of the curve how this is the usage in 2020 with the closure and reopening with the reservation system. So it's just kind of a good perspective and scale of how many people were using it, and then approximately how many people are using it now. And Judy, if you just want to go to the next one. So this one here, I was wanting to kind of have an idea of how much the Incline was used in a more granular sense. This is a great graph and really represents how much it's being used. So you can see on the far left, the big peak, July, as everybody knows, July 4th weekend-ish is usually the heaviest, busiest time. And July as a month is usually the heaviest, busiest month. And of course, that's probably a large because of the holiday. But it follows a typical bell curve of usage. And then you can see how when it gets to around January of 2020, how it kind of levels, it goes to a much smaller amount, drops off. And then you can see when the Incline was closed, and then you can see when it was reopened. And really what I wanted to point out with this chart was the reservation system now is approximately the equivalent usage of the off season, of the winter season. It's similar to, it's in the similar scale of about 5,000 people. And I think this data is per week. So each data point is 1 week. So, some of those points are about 5,000 people a week, when you could see that back in July of 2019, it was maybe 13 to 14,000 people a week. So this is just showing how, and the other thing is you can kind of see how it's somewhat of a tabletop of usage. There's a little bit of differentials. I'm pointing to my screen because you guys can obviously see what I'm pointing at. But on the right side, it should be a much more horizontal curve because the total number of users is being limited. The reason why it dips down is because not all of the people used their reservation. So the spikes are not people using it more than the reservation or more than the maximum amount. It's just that the dips were people using it less than the maximum amount, if that makes sense. In theory, you should see this thing pegged and just be a tabletop. But people are, not everyone is using all the reservations. And then Judy, if you just want to pull up the last one, please. So this is my ode to the Broncos and a bit of a difficult slide to read. And I apologize, but it's because there was a significant amount of data. And what I did was I went into the NOAA weather website and I pulled off the weather, the high and the low for those days. And I overlaid that data on the incline usage for that day. And the point of this was I was trying to correlate how the temperature affects the users, right? So when it gets really, so starting your left side of the screen here, that number one on the far left side, that's November 1st, 2019, because I was really wanting to see how in the winter time, the usage has historically been impacted. And I apologize, there's so much data on the screen, but the orange line are the number of incline users on the step counter. And then the blue line is the average daily temp. So you can see how the average daily temps really dropped. They went along and then there was a big spike over Thanksgiving, or that was early November when the temperature got really warm where the blue line went up. And then so the orange usage went way up. Basically, you can see a correlation between temperature and usage, which in the wintertime, which doesn't make, it's no surprise. But what I wanted to highlight here was as you get to your middle of your screen, you can see how the average daily temps drop around, this is day 97, which I don't know what day that was. That's probably early January, middle January. And then you can see how the incline users drop with it. They drop accordingly. So we used this data, and this is kind of how we helped figure out the temperature threshold of what we felt was if the temperature is above that temperature, we tend to see more users. And then if the temperature is below that number of users, we tend to see a lot less users. And that was kind of help. And this data helped kind of correlate and support the decision to do that.
So there's one more attachment.
Okay.
That's the.
Can I ask a question about this slide before we leave?
Okay.
Sure.
Do you want me to wait?
Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, it's Dole, the part that I'm really not good at graphs, but the part that I'm confused with is near the end of the year where you see the temperature, the brownish line is way low and the usage is way high, even exceeding 4th of July. So in that respect, there is not such a correlation as you would suggest. Isn't that right? Or am I missing?
Are you saying on the right fourth of the chart? So
Yeah.
the orange line or the brown line, that's the actual incline users. So that's when the incline was closed down there. And then
oh no,
the blue
I'm talking about like 139 to 181.
Okay. Well, but the point is I think that was probably a nice, and I should probably do the math. I mean, 130 days from November would be November, December, January, February, March. So, I mean, that could have been a beautiful Saturday over spring break. And it was nice. The temperature was nice. And so they had a lot of incline users, this last, that might have been, I don't know when that was. I'd have to pull up the data and see exactly what day that was. But this basically tells you that the weather was relatively nice because it was a spike in the blue. If I were to draw a blue vertical line, you would see how it slowly increases, which is what you'd expect the data temps to increase. But you can see how on day 130, it spiked even more than average. So there were 2 days, there was probably a Saturday and a Sunday. That was beautiful. And so there was a lot more incline users those days, 1,200 people a day, and then about 10,050 the next day.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I just realized I've been mostly going off the packet instead of your screen. And in my packet, it didn't have the color chart over to the right. It was cut off. So I was reading it backwards. I thought that the brown was the temperature. So my apologies.
Okay.
But I get it now though. Thank you.
one quick observation too is that as in looking at the spikes there for the incline usage, looks like they're about 7 days apart. So it's, I could pretty well attribute a portion of that to, the weekend traffic being higher. But so I think that's
Exactly.
another
Thank you for
factor.
pointing that out. Yes, terrific. Yes.
But I think it's an interesting correlation here. I'm intrigued by it.
I know. I really do like the data. It tells us a lot.
It's great.
And then I think we have one more, Judy.
Check in, just make sure you're ready to move on here.
Another slide or?
Yep, I'm working on it.
Oh, and this came up. I think I put in your topic the number of service calls per month. And we got that information from the fire department. And this is simply just wanting to compare that the number of emergency service calls have been reduced dramatically. This is showing that in previous years, we've had as high as 89. And then really in the modern time, it's, we had a low as 51, and that's the year it closed in the fall. So there were fewer users. And I don't know if I did a summary in your packet, but I know in November, I think we had one emergency call for the fire department. And the story there was that someone was running down Bar Trail and tripped and fell. So he probably was an Incline user, but it was someone who was running down Bar Trail and was exhausted probably. So I only wanted to point out that the number of emergency service calls have dropped dramatically as well. And that's exactly what the Hanging Lakes folks said would happen.
Are we done with those?
Yes, Judy, thank you for doing that.
Do we have questions for Dole or for Roy at this point? Mr. Bremner.
Yeah, what are the hours for the Incline reservation people for the winter?
So it's from 7 a.m. Roy, I always forget. Oh, it's 6 a.m. to 3 o'clock.
Steve, are you saying something? You're muted, Steve, but it looks like your mouth is moving.
Okay, yeah, I go run by there every other day or so. Sometimes like 7:30, 8:30 in there. And I often see nobody there.
You don't see any attendance at the base of the incline, you're saying?
That's correct. No
Okay.
table, no attendance.
Weekend, weekdays, it's just random or
Weekdays or
Weekdays.
weekends, both.
weekend? Okay.
Well, actually,
Well,
weekends I normally see people. I haven't, it's usually like during the week that I don't see somebody sometimes. And I've heard that they have a variance that they don't have to go in if it's below 32 degrees, I think, or something. So
we did put a temperature in there. No, what we did is that if the weather is going to be unsafe, that they would communicate with us and to let us know that there'd be no attendance out there.
But Dole, we haven't had any of those in the last month or so, right?
I think we have had that weekend in early November that was frigid when everyone's sprinklers broke and all that kind of stuff. That was our first real cold freeze. And that was what brought this topic up. Colorado Springs approached us. They said, here's what we're seeing. Here's the highs. We don't, and so we agreed that not only was it was really not safe for the attendants to be up there, but the amount of people coming to use the incline would be reduced significantly because of the such frigid temperatures that parking would not be an issue. they still have to follow all the rules. They still have to park where they're supposed to park and make a reservation, but the incline attendance would not be at the base of the incline on those really frigid days.
Wolf?
So Joel, on the days when the attendance won't be there for whatever reason, weather or apparently, because we haven't had a lot of frigid weather problems, and Steve Bremner is right there all the time, like every day. And frequently nobody's there in the morning. So is there no requirement for them to communicate with you when, when no one's going to show up, or to communicate with Denise or anyone with us? They just they could just kind of take a few mornings a week off, and there's no requirement for us to have any explanation. Is that correct? Is that how it works?
That's not how it's supposed to work. And what Mr. Bremner just said was news to me. And I would love the chance to kind of look into that. And even if Mr. Bremner could even maybe snap a picture or two when he jogs by, that would be really helpful, because
I've got a couple pictures.
okay, that would be helpful to share with us, and we can look into that, because the city of Colorado Springs, they signed the winter MOU, our winter MOU, and it still has 7-day-a-week incline attendant at the base of the incline, and they have all indication have said that they've been out there and all those kind of things. So that's kind of news to me.
And Kurt Schroeder is apparently on at this meeting tonight, so he's hearing all of this.
Hi, Kurt.
We have other comments or questions from council? Okay, apparently not. Dole, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I do, and I didn't mean to chime in on the shuttle conversation. It wasn't really my topic, but I did want to weigh in on the maps part of it, because I think that that's critical. But and I just to confirm, the incline reservation system, the way it is now, is really the shuttle is critical to it operating during its normal business hours now. So I wanted to point that out, that if the shuttle were to be stopped or discontinued, then the incline reservation system would have to be reevaluated based on the new variables that would be presented.
Good point. Thank you. Any other comments or questions relative to the incline? Not. Mr. Cheney.
Yeah, I do have a question for council members. Has anyone seen increased activity after 3 o'clock on the incline since we made the changes? Has there been a noticeable increase?
Councilor Wolf, do you have a response?
I haven't seen it myself. I don't climb the incline, but I do follow social media. And it sounds like people are having a blast. They love it. They talk about it. I know, what's his name? Mr. Barron. I'm terrible with names, but whoever it is just apologized for telling all of his followers, to just go on up after 3 o'clock, because it's going to be, closed and blah, blah, blah. And then I guess someone called him out on it. But it seems like there's a lot of people commenting on what a nice time of day it is to go up there and so forth. And so I would imagine it's an increase, but maybe it's just more of an increase in talking about it, because now it's illegal. So it's more exciting.
Thank you.
Mr. Bremner?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on that post that was made. I didn't realize that he'd apologized for that post, but it did go sort of viral on Facebook. A lot of people were sharing it, and it went to some of the Manitou Springs sites. I didn't make any comments on it or anything, but I did notice that it was quite commented on, and so I think it was socially irresponsible.
Oh, Steve, I need to clarify. He apologized, but then he totally took back the apology and zinged it. So, it was one of those mandatory apologies that you'll have to read it.
So I don't really care to read it.
Just saying.
Dole?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, we are tracking that and keeping an eye on that. That is on our radar, and between the step counter and between site observations And I think you guys are aware that the city of Colorado Springs has hired a private security firm, and they make patrols. And so they have done a good job taking pictures and reports of things. They're taking pictures of a car that's parked in the bar lot at 3 a.m. and they provided a report with that. So that Roy and I talk about that frequently, about the risks of it being used or abused after the hours and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to find a good balance with what's reasonable for them to be out there, and then for people to just go and try to break the rules because they can, so it's a balancing act.
Yeah, and Kurt Schroeder and his crew have really been, it's been good meetings. They've been real proactive, and when we bring up issues, they are responsive. So anything that was brought up tonight, I'm sure they'll respond and we'll find some solutions. So.
So can I ask council, do you want, I know weekly you get an update and you get minutes and you get all the information that's happening with the Incline. I'm assuming that you are wanting a yearly update, not a quarterly, not 60 days, not 90 days, not 180 days, or maybe it's twice a year. I don't know. I just want to make sure that we meet your needs, because Roy and Dole's on top of this. They're managing it closely. They're meeting weekly, all of those things. But I'm thinking you're wanting a yearly update, especially because everything's in the weekly report. And if you want anything more than that, you would reach out and say, can we have an update? Is that correct?
Some head nods there.
Okay. Okay, because it's really weekly. I mean, every week you get an update on the weekly report. Dole always puts something about the Incline on there.
I would certainly want a report if there were any really significant changes that were made. I mean, we're hoping that 2021 brings us a COVID vaccine, and I'm sure there'll be talk about when we're not social distancing as much, that there'll be talk about increasing Incline user. I would just say, certainly annually, but if there were any significant events or changes, I would certainly want to be updated.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that concludes this issue. Dole, thank you very much, Dole and Roy, for your good efforts. We appreciate it.
It's good to see everyone. It's been a little while.
Likewise.
Ditto.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead. Let's move on now to council correspondence. Does anyone have anything? Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure. I think most of you know that I serve as council liaison to various entities, and one of them, which is a regional entity, is the Fountain Creek Watershed District Board, which also includes the Fountain Creek Watershed Enterprise. I have served on that for the past better part of 3 years. My term ends on January 31st. So that you know, I represent all the small municipalities, which includes like Green Mountain Falls, Monument, Manitou, etc. It is an appointed position, so El Paso County Commissioners actually appoint the person. My question here is there anyone on the Manitou City Council who would like to be appointed to that board since my term is ending, or not? And I'll tell you, it meets once a month. It meets, pre-COVID, it met in the Fountain City Hall. It's the fourth Friday of every month at 2:00. The meetings typically last from 1 to 2 hours, depending on what's on the agenda. The enterprise is primarily the funds that are used to do mitigation for the creek and the water going into stormwater going into Pueblo primarily. And but the board does a lot with trails, regional trails associated with the creek. So I'm looking at Judith because I thought she might be, if she's interested in it. But again, no pressure, because I can go to the other communities as well. it's kind of interesting. Richard Scorman is on it, although his term also ends. Council commissioners from Pueblo County and El Paso County are on it. Fountain City Council, Pueblo City Council, Colorado Springs City Council, and then the citizens. So it's an interesting opportunity to learn a little bit more about the rest of the region.
Well, since my name came up, it sounds really interesting. Unfortunately for me, it's the timing. It's the Friday that is not currently going to work for me. So unless something happens between now and January. So thank you for thinking about it.
Sure. I'm seeing people just jump out of their seats at this wonderful opportunity.
Denise has her hand raised. Denise?
I just want to say, I think it would be great if we could have one of our council represent the region, because it gives you the opportunity to really speak about how it impacts Manitou. So if there's somebody that could or is willing to serve, it's really nice to have this be one of our council members.
And I could look at extending for at least a year on it. But anyway, more to follow. We'll just find somebody. Either I can extend if the rest of the council is not something they want to do, or I'll go to the other cities and ask them for a representative. Thanks.
Thank you.
Julie, did you raise your hand, or were you just, yeah, you did raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, Julie?
This is off topic a bit, but it just occurred to me, I was just thinking back to the Mountain Metro situation, and I just want to emphasize that we're under no obligation to sign long-term obligations with them. I don't want to hear that there's another 5-year lease that we're locked into that we can't change because we just committed to 5 years or something. So since there's a lot of good discussion tonight about different things being investigated, I'd like to just propose that unless there's some financial reason to do otherwise, that we look at a 1 year, just look at a much shorter term obligation so that we have an opportunity to make the changes that were discussed tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Cheney, you were nodding your head. Do you have a comment on that?
I think that's a great idea with COVID and the COG, and I think it might be a good idea to be careful in how long we set something up, because we may have to change it. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Councilor Chandler, did you have comments?
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I didn't know if you had anything else you want to talk about, Nancy? Or did I?
Just, I've been at URA and Parab and other things, but nothing hot that needs to be discussed tonight. Thanks.
Okay, great. Councilor Wolbrook?
Actually, I'm sorry, there was one thing, and that is that the match board did their training last week on for the tier 2 applications. And unfortunately, as with everything with the community, we had very few people show up, which was disappointing. But Natalie and Becca Sykbert, whatever her name is, showed up, and they are going to advertise it within the community for the tier 2 application. So that was really good. Thanks. Sorry I interrupted on that.
No, that's okay. That's fine. Okay. I had an opportunity Sunday morning to go out with Councilor Bremner and one of his neighbors, Trevor Beckner, and they took me around Lower Mount Manitou, and we looked at homeless sites, and boy, there's a lot of cleanup work to be done there, but they have done a good job of inspecting them, and those sites are documented with GPS locations, and I think they have a good sense of how much work is involved. We also looked at the site where the fire was, and I guess it makes me a little nervous to see how many fire rings there are up in there amongst that dry timber. But I want to thank Steve and his neighbors for the work they've done. They've done a lot of cleanup already, and more to come. And I will mention too, we have council meeting, of course, a regular meeting next week, and then we're off for the rest of the year. So, okay, Councilor Wolbrook, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of notes. I know that tonight we talked a little bit about getting food to go, and I'd just like to give a shout out to all the people who live in my neighborhood who get food to go, because I see a lot of them walking by with to-go food throughout the day. And it's really, I noticed this back in March when we had the really severe lockdowns, but I noticed it immediately as soon as the indoor dining was canceled. And that it's really important that we do that. But we also need to support our downtown businesses who really rely on this holiday shopping. It carries them through at least part of a very long winter for businesses in Manitou. And I just want to remind everybody, we rely a lot on sales tax revenue from our businesses, and they're really hurting on so many levels. There's definitely been a lot of conversations on social media about whether or not council supports our business community. I think we do. Maybe we just don't talk about it enough. But we have lots of amazing places in Manitou to get some gifts, holiday gifts. You still have time to ship. You have about until the 18th to ship first class, and a priority mail would be the 19th of December. So you've got time. It's not too late. The post office is doing a great job, not just only here in Manitou, but they're really, I think, delivering packages as, really as quickly as they can. So if there's something that you're thinking of getting, please try to get it here in Manitou and support these businesses. This is an incredibly tough year for them. And I don't think it's going to be any better in the early part of 2021. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that. And kudos to the people I see walking up and down my street with boxes of food to go. I know that the businesses appreciate that a great deal. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Julie?
Well, speaking of holidays, Thursday is Hanukkah. So I just want to say happy Hanukkah to all of our Jewish and non-Jewish people in the area listening. Happy holidays.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's very thoughtful. Okay. Great.
Oh,
Any other council members with things? Okay, I don't see anything. Okay, let's go on to the city administration reports. Roy, you want to?
Yeah, just the only thing I have is I'll be spending more time this week than at Public Works and working with the Parks Department and the Public Works Department, helping them out. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Denise? You're muted.
Darn it, rats. I just want to say a couple of things. As I went down and I swam this morning at 6 o'clock, and they're doing a phenomenal job there at the pool and the workout center. It was very well managed, everything of when you come in, what happens. So shout out to them and all that they're doing. Also want to talk about Santa will be coming. And he has a direct line with the fire department. So there'll be more information about when he'll be coming to Manitou. So be on the lookout. But the fire department and Santa they talk on a regular basis. So there'll be more information coming out about that. So I just want to share that. I also want to say, I do want to shout out to all of staff during COVID and all the things that are happening. We have had some challenges, and boy, has everybody stepped up to manage. And it's more challenging when you work remote, providing the same customer service and hitting all the deadlines. And I think the biggest, several departments, Public Works has a lot of challenges right now. Planning, trying to hit all their deadlines remote has been a real challenge, but they're on top of it and they're providing that customer service and trying to hit every deadline as we go forward. And they're really pushing to do things more online for staff. So I want to shout out to planning for that. The other thing I want to mention is, I think tonight you guys saw, you saw Christine, you saw Roy, you saw Dole, and just the quality of staff that we have as we're managing various projects, and how they're really analyzing it and making sound business decisions as we move forward. With Hiawatha and with the library, it's really important that we look at both of those as a citywide project. So we're really going to have to talk about that. And I'm asking both, I've asked Christine and Crystal to kind of wait for Match. We don't want to get ahead of Match. You guys have given Match some real clear direction. So as we do that, that's the one thing that, you know, they're doing their work and they're doing phenomenal work, but we got to wait for Match to come through and provide you guys the recommendation and that decision be made before we can really look at doing any financing. And it's both of those are city entities, so we have to look at it from that way. Other than that, I believe that's all I have at this time. So thank you as always, and we'll see you next week. Do you have any questions for either Roy or I? We're trying to keep you pretty updated, but, oh, and then the drought. I will tell you, we are concerned about the fall or the spring, and we're already starting to look at planning for that financially, and how do we get the word out, and what does that look like, and what's the education that we need to get out. But with the dryness, I think we're all concerned right now about what next summer brings, and from a fire perspective.
Great. Well, if there's no objection, we've covered everything. And if no objection, we'll call it a night and we're adjourned. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening.